One of the things that I realized from the feedback I received from my beta readers on the fourth wall was that readers are struggling to stay in the character's skin and in the world and the story because they're getting caught up with my prose. To combat that, I'm looking for stage blocking and certain words that I use as a crutch. Join me as I level up a page of my manuscript, and if you're a writer, maybe you can get some ideas of things you can do to level up your own manuscript. This is maybe my 5th or 6th complete draft of the novel. However, in this pass alone, I'm going over each chapter at least 4 times, and in each pass, I'm isolating different tasks. My first pass is a developmental pass. Because of the feedback I got, I did some major world building in one of my 2 settings in order to really flesh out those characters that exist in that setting. This is the major focus of that first pass, is to level up the world building. There are a few other things like some scene changes. I'm adding a few scenes here or there, but the developments in this chapter are rather small. It's focusing on characters. 6 major characters, including the antagonist and protagonist, are introduced. So the characters are just so important here that I have to get them right. The footage you see is by no means the entire footage of me working on this chapter. That would be the longest video ever. I have spent hours and hours and hours on this chapter. I uploaded a before and after image to my website so that you guys can see really the major changes that are happening with this draft. You can check out a link to that in the description below. Next, I'm going through and doing a word search for tons of words that I use too often and use as a crutch. I don't really worry about any of these words right away, but I mark them early so that I can see them as I'm doing the other passes. I'll explain more about how I use this word search in a minute. My next pass, I'm honing in on stage blocking. Stage blocking is a theater term that refers to placing characters in specific spots on stage. As writing goes, it's not very interesting to read. I'm going through and cleaning things up and changing things like she sat at a table to something more like this. She sat at one of the many tables reading a book. Her straight black hair wound around her neck, over her bare shoulder and down her side, with a just brush sheen that only Becky could pull off after jostling her way downtown like he had. She posed deliberately with heavily outlined eyes blinking over the book, showing off the cover to everyone in the room. She popped, but in Andre's opinion, she always popped, makeup or not. Andre recognized the single and interested reading position even from his vantage point at the entrance. He couldn't make out the title of the book, but if it was a proper courtship novel and Becky knew what she was doing, which of course she did, it would telegraph to interested parties whether she looked for something casual with a racier title and cover, or if she wanted something more serious with a title and cover that screamed commitment. One is exit stage left, the other puts us in the skin of the characters and into this world. My next pass is technically looking for stage blocking as well, and honestly in the future these 2 passes might mix together anyway, but now I'm finally looking for those words I marked. This is what you see me working on in this video. Words like sat, stood, nodded, shook his head, put, placed, are words I often use in my stage blocking, and marking them helps me see them, and I can either just take them out or change them so that they're actually telling a story and not just like, oh, she nodded, whoa, whatever that means. Because so and was are indicators that I'm using exposition, I try to get rid of those by turning those sentences into story, showing instead of telling. It, that, and this are words that I use too often, and often without a clear antecedent. Like, it's not clear what I'm referring to when I say that or when I say it. I don't get rid of all of these words. I try to focus on the words that are bringing my manuscript down or are pulling readers out of the story. Once I've done the word search pass, it's amazing how different my novel looks. The story could be exactly the same, but the flow is completely different, and the manuscript is just easier to read. Along with that, I'm actually finding more space for world building and character building that I didn't have before. So I will do a final pass just to make sure I'm getting in those character and world building elements now that there's more space and more freedom and more fluidity to the chapter. Finally, I look back at my beta reader feedback and just look for any specific things that they pinged, maybe an awkward sentence, or maybe something that they didn't understand. I just go back to my new manuscript and I make sure that I handled those issues. If you enjoyed this deeper dive into my writing process, make sure to smash that like button. I'm planning to have the fourth wall done and ready to shop by the end of the year or close to it. So hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss when it's ready. As I was working on this video, I realized I could do an entire video on my experience with beta reading and how I'm handling that feedback. Let me know in the comments below if you're interested in seeing that process. Writing a novel is a journey. Click the card to check out other tips and tricks that I use to help me come up with my ideas, characters, and more.